Hundreds of thousands of ABAP programmers are about to lose their jobs. Not might, not could, are going to. And most of them don't know yet. The skill they spent their entire careers building, SAP doesn't need it anymore. The code they maintain every day, SAP is actually telling companies to delete it. And the offshore model that employs them, it's collapsing contract by contract, client by client right now. I'm Noel Benjamin DeCosta, 25 years of implementing SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft ERP systems. Over 100 projects, and I've managed offshore ABAP teams, signed the contracts with Wipro, TCS, Deloitte, Accenture, Cognizant, and I know what an offshore ABAP developer costs per hour, per month, per year. And I know how this model works. And I'm telling you, ABAP as a career is ending. Not evolving, not transforming, it's ending. The programming language that built the largest offshore IT workforce in history is really being eliminated by SAP's own strategy and by AI that writes the code faster and cheaper by a deadline that is 22 months away. This video is about what happens to those people, not the top 10% who pivot into cloud architecture, the other 90%, the 28-year-old in Pune who's been writing Z reports since he graduated, the 35-year-old in Bangalore with 12 years of classical ABAP and nothing else on his resume, the woman in Hyderabad who finished a 6 months training course because an academy promised her a placement, and the father of two in Chennai who has a home loan, a single income, and a 35-day bench window before his company lets him go. So, what happens to them, right? I got a phone call 8 months ago from a developer, and I'll call him Raj. What he told me is the reason this video exists. The story is coming, so don't skip to it. The numbers have to come first because without the numbers, you won't understand how big this problem is. SAP has 35,000 ECC customers, and the mainstream support ends on 31st of December 2027. As of late 2024, Gartner reported only 39% had even licensed S4HANA. Over 21,000 companies are still on legacy, and all of them will eventually migrate or die on the vine. Every migration requires a clean code assessment. SAP's data shows that 60 to 75% of all custom ABAP objects are never executed in production. And SAP's recommendation is delete before migration. So SmartShift, one of the biggest custom code management firms, reports the same, which is 40 to 70% across their client base. So a typical large enterprise has around 5,000 to 50,000 custom ABAP objects, right? So delete 60%, that's around 3,000 to 30,000 per company. Now multiply that by 35,000 customers. So the scale is staggering. Now here's the human number. The SAP ecosystem roughly employs around 1.6 million people worldwide, and developers form around a third of that. So ABAP is one of the most common skills in the ecosystem. Now, the largest concentration is in India. The offshore development centers, whether they're in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Chennai, and they're all employed by TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, Tech Mahindra, even Cognizant, LTI, Mindtree, right? Now, the top five Indian IT firms itself employ around 1.5 million people. They've already cut around 42,000 jobs in 2 years. TCS cut around 12,000 in a single quarter, that is July 2025, and their own description is skill mismatch. Now, that phrase, which is skill mismatch, let that sit because what TCS is saying is that what every other system integrator knows, but won't say it plainly. That is, we have hundreds and thousands of people with a skill the market no longer needs. Then SAP launched Joule for developers in February of 2025. AI trained on 250 million lines of SAP code, and it generates a BAP, and it explains legacy programs and refactors the old code. Now, it also, creates unit tests, automates custom code migration. And IDC found that, 80% of developers using AI assistants saw a 35% productivity gain. So SAP's 2026 roadmap, published in, I think, January this year, the direct quote from the SAP community blog is that agent-led flows own the task. So you need to understand, right? It is about transformation, the test, and the enforcement of clean core. The AI doesn't help the ABAP developer. The AI replaces the ABAP developer. The remaining, human reviews what the AI has produced. That's not an ABAP job. That's a completely different job, right? So let me do the math that nobody wants to hear. So a typical AMS contract has around 25 offshore ABAP developers. The client migrates, and then 60% of that code is deleted. So AI handles that migration. Now, the post migration support is 5 people, which is completely different skills. So you're going from 25 and that becomes 5. That's 20 people per contract who are no longer needed. They're not reskilled into the same role at a different level. They're not needed. And the work that they did no longer exists. So scale that across thousands of AMS contracts worldwide, right? Hundreds and thousands of ABAP developers whose daily work, the specific code that they maintain, the specific skills that they use is being deleted and automated simultaneously. Now, this is the part that people don't want to talk about. The industry uses words like, reskilling and upskilling and workforce transformation. Those words actually hide what's coming. Let me be honest about what, not needed looks like for an ABAP developer in 2026. It means that your AMS contract doesn't renew. Your system integrator moves you to the bench, and then you sit on the bench for around 30, 60, 90 days. And if nothing opens, you get a performance improvement plan, and then you're separated. And that's the polite word, right? The bench used to be around 45 to 60 days at most Indian IT firms. It's now 35 to 45 days, and it's shrinking because the companies are done carrying surplus headcount. And they've said so publicly, brazenly, right? TCS, Wipro, Infosys, all of them reduced their bench sizes in the last 18 months. So you're a classical ABAP developer and your contract ends. Your integrator puts you on the bench. Now, what roles are available? S4HANA migration projects that need RAP, BTP, CDS views, Fury. You don't know those, right? So modern cloud development using CAP and SAP Build, you don't know those either. Now, AI augmented development using Joule, you've never touched it. The roles that exist require skills that you don't have. And the roles that match your skills are disappearing. And that's the mismatch. That's what TCS means when they say skill mismatch. And here's the part that makes this a crisis instead of just a disruption. This isn't a few thousand people. The Indian IT services industry has, entire business units built around SAP ABAP maintenance. We're talking about a workforce the size of a mid-sized city. You're talking about developers, team leads, quality analysts, program and project managers, delivery managers, an entire hierarchy built on the top of classical ABAP work. Now, when the base disappears, the whole structure above it collapses. The delivery manager who managed 30 ABAP programmers, right, that role doesn't exist when the team is 5 and has an AI tool. And the QA analyst who tested the ABAP reports, Joule generates unit tests. So the team lead who coordinated the onshore offshore delivery of Z programs, there are no Z programs to deliver anymore. So this isn't one layer, it's the whole stack. So early in my career, government SAP implementations, large offshore ABAP teams were required. There was a senior developer. He was quiet, but he was brilliant. 15 years of ABAP. He knew the system better than the functional consultants. Now, late night call, I'm frustrated, blaming the offshore team, and he stops me and he says, Noel, do you think the code is the job? The code was never the job. The job is understanding what the business needs and making the system do it. Now, the code is just a language that we use to translate. And he was right. And that sentence holds the answer to the question that this video is asking, but it also holds a brutal truth. So, most offshore ABAP programmers were never given the chance to learn the business. The offshore model was designed to separate them from it. Now, functional consultants onshore write the specifications, the developers offshore write the code. Now, the developer never talks to the business user and never sits in the workshop. I mean, sometimes they do, but and most of the times they don't. And they never understand the process behind the program. They just receive a specification and then they write the code and they ship it back. Now, the industry built hundreds and thousands of those people into pure coders. And now that coding is completely being automated. The very model that employed them is the model that made them disposable. Which brings me to Raj. You remember I talked about Raj at the beginning of this video. Now, it's not his real name, but the situation is real, and I've met dozens of Rajas in my career. So, 8 months ago, a phone call came from a developer I worked with, 3 years ago. He was from Pune, 31 years old, one of the biggest system integrators, a BAP since he was around 23. So, around 8 years of experience, his entire adult career. And his client was a European manufacturer and had just completed, phase one of their S4 HANA clean code assessment. Now the result landed on his desk. So 64% of the custom ABAP objects that he had been maintaining for 4 years were flagged as unused and scheduled for deletion. Now, these were reports that nobody ran, interfaces to systems decommissioned years ago, and the enhancement for processes that changed maybe 3 times since the code was written. And he maintained all of that. He closed the tickets, hit his SLAs, never questioned whether the code was necessary. So the surviving 30% was going to be migrated using Joule and SAP's custom code migration tools. Just a team of 5 onshore reviewing the AI output. His AMS team of 22 was being replaced. Now, Raj wasn't on that list of 6 because the 6 had RAP, they had CDS, they had BTP, they had Fiori. Raj was just a classical ABAP, 8 years of it. His integrator moved him to a different ECC client, the same work but different company. But that client is planning S4 HANA migration next year. So a different client, but the same clock. Then he told me the part that stuck with me. And he said, Noel, I'm 31. I have a home loan. My wife stopped working when our daughter was born. Now, if this contract ends, I can't find another one within 60 days. So I've got to go back to my hometown, and there's no SAP work out there. And so my career is over. Now, honestly, he wasn't being dramatic. He was just doing the math. The same math thousands of developers are doing right now. Monthly EMIs, single income, 35-day bench windows, no matching roles, no transferable skills outside of SAP, no backup plan, because nobody told him that he needed one. And while Raj is running those numbers, the training academies in Bangalore are still running ads. SAP ABAP, future proof your career, 100% placement assistance, great starting salaries, pumping more money into a pipeline that leads to a job that won't exist in 3 years. Now, taking money from families who can barely afford it for a skill the market is actively eliminating. Now, that's not just a market correction. For me, that's a betrayal. So Raj asked me directly, what do I do? Now, I couldn't give him an easy answer because there isn't one. But here's the honest conversations that nobody in the industry is having. The uncomfortable truth is that not everyone makes it. So, when the typing pool disappeared, not every typist became a computer operator. When manual accounting was replaced by spreadsheets, not every bookkeeper became a financial analyst. So, technology transitions create winners and they create losers. The industry talks about reskilling, as if it's like a conveyor belt. Learn the new thing, get the new job, keep going. But the reality is that some people reskill successfully and some don't. And some can't, because of age, because of financial pressure, because of family obligations. The new roles require fundamentally different aptitudes than the old ones. So writing, classical ABAP, which is Z reports, function modules, dialogue programming, This is very procedural, very specification driven skills. But understanding business processes, architecting cloud extensions, working alongside AI, that requires abstract thinking. It requires communication skills, business judgment. These are very different skills, not higher or lower, but just very different. And some people who are excellent at the first won't be excellent at the second. Now, that's not criticism from my side, so don't take me wrong. That's a reality. So, what are the actual options that Raj has? So, option one is you have to evolve with SAP. So, some ABAP developers will make the jump to modern SAP. They'll do RAP, they'll do CDS views, they'll do BTP, they'll do Fiori, cloud application programming models, they'll do SAP Joule. These jobs exist and they're real and they pay well. But this is the critical part. There are far fewer of them because the 25 member team now becomes five. Even if all five are former ABAP developers who are reskilled, that's still 20 people with nowhere to go. The math doesn't work for the majority, even if reskilling is successful. And then there's a time window, right? Learning RAP and CDS views now, today, gives you a chance, but waiting until the contract ends is too late. The reskilling itself takes between 6 to 12 months of serious effort. So it's not a 2-week course. It's not watching, YouTube tutorials. It's about hands-on building. And so SAP offers free Joule access until I think September 2026. And the free BTP trial accounts, right? Free learning journeys on learning.sap.com. Those resources exist. The question is whether you start before you're forced to, right? Option two is move sideways into an adjacent technology. So classic ABAP developers, understand enterprise systems. They understand data flows, business logic, integration patterns, SQL, debugging, testing methodologies. These are transferable skills, but not to everything, but to some things, right? So you could do data engineering, business intelligence, cloud administration, Salesforce development, ServiceNow, Workday, enterprise integration. Some of these require significant retraining, but some of them overlap, more than you'd expect. So a 30-year-old ABAP developer who spent maybe 6 months learning Python, SQL, and maybe a cloud data platform has a real shot at a data engineering role. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible. The enterprise context you already understand, right? You understand how an ERP works, you understand master data, you understand transactional data, the reporting. These are all valuable in data roles. Now, this isn't a natural pivot for everyone, but it requires the initiative and the investment. But for developers who are honest with themselves about ABAP's trajectory, the adjacent paths are real. Now, option three is move towards the business side. I always remember what my mentor said, right? The code was never a job. The job is understanding what the business needs and making the system do it. So, some ABAP developers, especially the ones that you've been on projects for years and quietly absorbed the business knowledge, have a part to functional consulting, business analysis, or project coordination. Now, they understand how SAP works in practice and not just in theory, but you need to understand how a month end close actually runs. What happens when a goods received doesn't match a purchase order? Why that particular pricing condition exists? Now, that knowledge is hugely valuable in a way that pure coding knowledge isn't anymore. But the challenge is most offshore ABAP developers are deliberately isolated from the business. So the model kept them in a code only role. And so this pivot requires actively building business knowledge you were never given the opportunity to learn on the job. So it's harder, but for some people, this is the path that leads to the most secure career long term growth. So option four is, just leave SAP entirely. Now, this is the option nobody in the SAP ecosystem wants to mention, but it's the most realistic part for a significant percentage of the affected developers. Now, not every ABAP developer will find a job or a home in modern SAP, and not every ABAP developer will successfully pivot to data engineering or functional consulting. Some will need to leave enterprise software altogether, right? They need to go into web development, mobile apps, DevOps, cybersecurity, cloud infrastructure. Now, some of these are adjacent enough that the transition is feasible, and some require, starting over. Now, this isn't about a failure. When a technology dies, the people who build careers on it find new careers. When I was just starting my career, it was all about mainframe COBOL, which was in demand. And the developers were, hugely successful. They were paid a lot of money. Flash developers did it. The BlackBerry developers did it. The transition is painful. It takes time. And it means sometimes you need to get a pay cut. But it's not the end. The worst thing an ABAP developer can do right now is to pretend that ABAP will survive long enough to carry them into their retirement. It won't. Not a classical ABAP programmer, not on this timeline. If you're a CIO or a team lead, this is on you too as well. So if you run an offshore ABAP team and you know your client is migrating, within the next 2 years, your developers deserve to know. They need time to prepare, to reskill, to plan. Keeping them in the dark because it's easier than having a conversation is not really leadership, it's cowardice, right? So you need to audit your AMS contracts, run the SCMON, find out what percentage of the code is dead. Tell your team what the migration timeline looks like. Give them the chance to evolve before the contract ends. Because if you don't, you'll lose that institutional knowledge too. You know, why certain code exists, what business logic it encodes, which workarounds are load bearing. That knowledge walks out of the door when people leave. And Joule really can't replace that, what it doesn't know. So I would say document everything. Start the reskilling programs now, not after the contract is signed. And if your system integrator is still selling 25% classical ABAP AMS teams, knowing that the work is about to disappear, call them on it, right? Because the contract isn't serving your business, it's serving their revenue. So this isn't about ABAP, right? Because Oracle cut 30,000 people to fund a $300 billion AI infrastructure bet. I covered this on this channel as well. Microsoft is embedding Copilot across Dynamics 365, and SAP is rebuilding its entire platform around Joule. So, the offshore IT model, the model that built India's technology industry into a $250 billion powerhouse, was built on labor arbitrage. Now, skilled people at lower costs. That model works when the work requires people. Now, when AI does the work, the arbitrage disappears. So the AI costs the same in Bangalore and Berlin, and ABAP is the Canary. So if this is what happens to one programming language inside one enterprise platform, what happens next across all of enterprise technology, across all of offshore? So the people who built their careers on being cheaper just discovered that the software is cheaper than everyone. I started with 60%, the dead code. I ended with Raj, the 31-year-old, the home loan, single income, 35-day bench window, and a skill that, that the market is eliminating. So for me, Raj represents hundreds of thousands of people. So he's not a statistic. These are real lives, real families, real, EMIs, real choices that need to be made in the next 12 to 18 months. So some will evolve into modern SAP, some will just pivot to adjacent technologies, and some will move forward on the business side, and some will leave SAP entirely. Some won't make the transition. None of that changes unless the conversation starts. I hope this video is the start to that conversation, right? So if you are a app developer, stop pretending that this isn't happening, right? Look at your client's migration timeline. Look at the skills gap between where you are and where the market is going. And make a decision, a real one, not, I'll upskill later. A decision with a date on it. And if you're a CIO, tell your teams the truth, give them the time, document the knowledge before it walks out. And if you're a training academy still selling classical ABAP as a future proof career, you know what you're doing. And the people paying you deserve better, right? Oracle is cutting around 30,000 people. SAP is automating the developer, and Microsoft is embedding AI into every workflow. So those videos are all on this channel. So watch them. The ABAP bloodbath is one piece of something much bigger. So subscribe. There's more coming. I'm Noel Benjamin DeCosta. Ciao.